Chapter 19, The Mysterious Returner Sympathizers. "I win!" Celes exclaimed cheerfully. "Now, honor your side of the bargain." Chere tried to hide the disappointed look on his face as he looked down and saw that the coin was indeed head side up. He nodded to confirm Celes was right, and Locke thought he was about to pass out from pure relief. Edgar grinned, and Cyan looked mildly relieved himself. Right then, Chere picked up the coin, and turned it over in his hands, a slight smile appearing on his lips. Celes blinked and gave Edgar a worried glance. Chere stood up and grinned even more, tossing the coin back to Edgar. "How unusual!" he exclaimed slowly. "A coin with identical sides." Celes smirked and put her hands on her hips. "I believe you've been hustled, Mr. Gambler." She smiled, and Chere burst out laughing, clapping his hands together. "Ha!" he exclaimed. "How low can you get? I love it. All right, I'll help you. I've got nothing to lose but my life. My life will be a chip in your pile. Ante up!" "Yes!" Edgar exclaimed, and Cyan went over to Chere, shaking hands with the man vigorously. Edgar stuffed the coin back in his pocket, smiling to himself. Worked like a charm, just like before. Edgar sighed in remembrance and thought of his brother. Good thing Sabin wasn't here to see the coin. He might have suspected me. "Celes, you nearly gave me a heart attack!" Locke snapped as Celes walked back over to him, and she merely smiled in reply. "And you let me worry even though you knew you would win the whole time. What's it to you who I marry, Locke Cole?" she suddenly asked, and Locke turned red. "What's it to me?" he repeated, and she nodded. "Yes, what's it to you?" "Well... Locke stuttered, and Edgar suddenly came over, interrupting them. "Celes, do you want to go back down to the opera house really quick and find your clothes?" Edgar asked, and Celes nodded quickly. "Please, let's go. I feel like I'm going to suffocate in this dress if I stay in it a moment longer." Celes replied, and with that, she turned away from Locke and left the airship with Edgar. Locke blinked and smacked his hand up against his forehead. Chere smiled to himself and put a hand on Locke's shoulder, making Locke glare up at him. "Would you like a tour of the ship?" Chere offered, and Locke softened his stare a little. Chere didn't seem like quite a bad character, although Locke was not going to be quick to forgive him for trying to get Celes to wed him. "Sure," Locke said, and Chere began to lead him to a ladder across the room that would lead to the upper deck of the ship. About a half an hour later, the Blackjack, Cere's name for his ship, was soaring high in the sky and crossing the ocean, making its way towards Vector, the capital of the southern continent. The sky was completely black, with clouds covering what little light the moon and stars emitted for the night. Chere and Locke were on the outside deck, talking about what exactly Locke, Celes, Edgar, and Cyan had to do in the Magitech research facility. As Locke explained himself the best he could, Chere piloted the airship. Edgar and Cyan were in the lower decks, enjoying a few good card games with each other, and Celes was sleeping, exhausted from her performance at the opera house. "So we don't exactly know what we're going to find there. But no matter what, we're going to free the Espers. I'd think you were talking poppycock to me if you weren't wearing that silly necklace." Chere replied, and Locke reached up almost automatically, slipping the magicite shard underneath his shirt again. "So, Espers are still among us?" "Apparently," Locke said. "And why is it so important that you free them?" Setzer pressed on, and Locke paused, not knowing if he should reveal much about that detail, considering it pertained to Chere and Ramu as well. All he had told Setzer was that they were going to Vector for the Espers. Setzer saw Locke's hesitation and chuckled a little.
It's okay. You don't have to tell me. I understand, I'm not a part of your little group. You might still consider me a man of the Empire. It's not that.
Locke said quickly.
It's just personal, for now.
He looked to Setzer.
What do you have to do with the Empire, anyway? Are you that close with them? Not really,
said Setzer.
I've only shipped weapons and such for them a few times, and once in a while they call me for quick transportation of their soldiers. I get paid well for their little errands, which has made me overlook some of the more nastier things they have been trying to pull off lately. But I'm not actually a part of the Empire. Just an extra card in their hot little hands. You don't have to do their dirty work for them, you know.
A new voice said firmly. Locke and Setzer both turned to the trapdoor in the floor of the deck where people could emerge from below, and saw Celes climbing out of it. She kicked the door shut once she was on her feet and walked over to the group, back in her old imperial uniform, the makeup washed away from her face, her hair flowing free from its binding ponytail. It was easy to tell there was still sleep in her eyes as she rubbed at one of them.
What's wrong, Celes? Couldn't sleep?
Locke questioned, and Celes nodded.
On account of my bad driving.
Setzer joked, and Celes smiled.
No, not exactly, just some bad dreams.
Celes replied, and her tone turned slightly more serious.
Don't let the Empire control you, Setzer. Well well.
Setzer chuckled.
Aren't we Miss Political? No, I'm just telling you the right thing.
Celes snapped.
Although I am sure they will screw you over soon enough, and you'll find out on your very own. I would make a bet on that.
She shook her head and walked over to the edge of the deck, leaning over the railing as she gazed at the land far below them. The wind caused her hair and her cape to flap backwards, and made her shiver as well. She wrapped her arms around herself to stay warm.
Well, Celes, can we really trust anybody in this dreary world?
Setzer offered.
I mean, a relationship with any other human is a gamble in itself. You risk losing everything, or gaining something incredible at the same time.
Celes turned to peer at him, and Locke felt a shiver run down his spine when he saw the passion in her eyes as she replied.
The last part you said was true,
she said.
And I have indeed lost everything that was important to me at one point of my life because of faulty relationships with others. But it didn't keep me from trusting and trying again.
Her gaze flickered from Setzer's to Locke's for a moment.
I have faith in my new friends. It's the only thing that has been keeping me going these past few days.
Locke opened his mouth to say something, but Setzer interrupted.
Is that what you think? Your words have touched my heart, Miss Celes. I hope that they one day reach my very soul as well, so that I can fully recuperate from the day I lost everything.
Celes blinked and Locke stared at Setzer in surprise. Setzer smiled at the two surprised expressions and looked out ahead of him, turning the wheel on the airship slightly to the right. Locke laughed nervously and kicked at the deck.
This unwieldy-looking ship really moves,
Locke exclaimed to change the subject.
Could it crash? When things fall, they fall,
Setzer exclaimed.
It's all a matter of fate. But this ship is going to stick out like a sore thumb,
Locke added.
Better land some distance away. Right,
Setzer replied.
And when we do land, I'll stay on board in case of an emergency. Does that sound okay to you, Celes?
Locke asked, but when he turned, he saw that she had disappeared from where she had been standing. She had probably got bored with the conversation and went back down to the lower deck. He felt his heartbeat suddenly quicken and a chill run down his spine at her absence, which he found to be an odd reaction. Locke sighed some and ran his fingers through his hair. Setzer looked away from the steering wheel to look to where Locke was staring, and then to Locke's gaze itself.
"Something wrong, Locke?"
Setzer asked, and Locke shook his head.
"I don't know exactly. I just got the strangest feeling,"
Locke replied, and Setzer raised his eyebrows.
"It was like I thought Celes was never coming back."
Hours later, just when dawn was beginning to break out over the horizon of the sky, the land edge of the southern continent could be seen from the surface deck of the Blackjack. Locke didn't get a wink of sleep the entire night, but he knew he couldn't even if he tried. He was both excited and deathly afraid at the same time of invading the Magitech research facility. It was the closest the returners had ever gotten to the actual core of the Empire. And yet, it was also the closest any returner had come to risking a painful death. As the Blackjack prepared to make its landing, the other returners came on deck, yawning and rubbing the sleep out of their eyes. Setzer made a careful and surprisingly quiet landing in a small field just beyond the short forest path that led to Vector, their ultimate destination.
"I'll be waiting right here,"
Setzer said.
"Remember that when you make your grand escape. Hopefully there won't be one,"
Cyan said nervously.
"We agreed to do this as safely as possible, didn't we, Edgar?" "Yes, Cyan, don't worry,"
Edgar exclaimed.
"Everything will be pulled off without a hitch. Celes said she knew this place well, so we should be fine."
Cyan looked to Celes, and Celes smiled.
"Well, when you get to Vector, just go straight to where you need to go,"
Setzer warned.
"Last I heard, they had this incredible machine called the Guardian imported into the city, and they use it to guard classified areas. The machine is literally invisible against anyone who tries to disarm it except for the Emperor Gestal, and if you try to destroy it, well, I'll do you an extra service in your honor by bringing your friends to your funerals." "Gee, thanks, Setzer."
Locke gulped.
"Please, we should go soon,"
Celes said.
"I really do want to get this over with." "The lady is right,"
Edgar exclaimed.
"Let's be on our way." "I'll thank you now, Setzer, in case I don't get to later." "Edgar, please,"
Locke cried. Edgar chuckled and patted Locke on the back.
"You look like you need to sleep, Locke, why don't you just stay with Setzer?"
Edgar asked, and Locke shook his head quickly.
No, Celes is right, let's just go. The Espers are waiting."
Cyan exclaimed somewhat cheerfully, and with that, bounded towards the ship's exit.
"Farewell."
Setzer smirked, and waved.
"Don't get hurt, Miss Celes. For some reason, I think I'll be the only uninjured returner."
Celes sighed as she proceeded to drag the nervous Locke and overly excited Edgar off the Blackjack. They joined Cyan in the field underneath the ship, and proceeded towards Vector. Along the way, Celes shared with the returners a bit more about the capital.
The city was built in a great hurry, because the Empire needed a place to claim as their own,
Celes explained.
"So most of the homes within are poorly constructed, and it's where all the poor people of the area live now. The Empire used them to build the rest of the city and the Imperial Palace, an ugly structure made completely out of metal plates and bolts, like a giant machine. The Magitech research facility is attached to the east wing of the palace, and it is the east end of the city that is the most smogged and filled with pollution. There used to be a river that ran through town, but it became so filthy and filled with pollution, all the creatures that lived in it died. I remember one summer when every day, carcasses of fish and small sea monsters would wash up on the shores of the river and fill the air with the stench of death. Eventually, the empire drained the river and built a dam further up north so that the water couldn't flow there anymore. So, the poor people who couldn't afford or weren't able to travel up north to get fresh water were at the empire's mercy. It's been like that ever since I can remember. Which is why most of the folk there have gone bad, some even worse than the people in Zozo. They aren't afraid to steal or assault to get what they need, so be on your guard. What a hellish place!
Cyan trailed off.
Only for the people who aren't a part of the empire.
Celes added.
Imperial officers and soldiers get to live in the palace, and while it may appear to be like a prison, it's actually luxurious if you have a high enough rank. Oh, but of course.
Cyan replied dryly, and Celes glared at him.
I'm not justifying how the people of Vector are being treated,
she said.
I'm just telling you how it is.
Locke and Edgar remained silent. The returners emerged from the small forest and came to the gates of Vector, which were unguarded as of today. The broken cobblestone streets reminded all of the returners of Zozo, only there were no rain puddles or bodies on the ground posing as obstacles. In some of the alleys that could be seen between the shabby houses were metal barrels with smoke rising out of them, and people in dirty, ragged clothes holding out sticks with some sort of meat stuck on them over the barrel. They must have been cooking breakfast. The orangish sky above was slowly fading into pink as the sun rose high over the imperial palace, which was just as Celes had described it, large, looming, and built up entirely of hard metal slabs the color of mud. A little ways northeast of the palace, long, thick trails of smoke could be seen rising into the sky.
That's our destination,
Celes noted, pointing to the smoke trails.
However, I am almost positive we will not be able to get there through the palace entrance. But is there another way?
Cyan questioned. Celes nodded, and looked around them. People had stopped in the streets and were starting to stare. They were making themselves targets for assault.
Let's get out of here and go somewhere where we can talk,
Celes said quickly.
I don't want to stay in one place for a long period of time. But where can we go?
Edgar questioned.
All these people look kind of shady. Just follow me,
Celes said, and gestured for the others to fall in step behind her. She made her way across town as quickly as she could manage, and began to climb the steps that lead to the imperial palace.
Celes,
Locke hissed in her ear from behind her.
What are we doing? Just be quiet and quit looking suspicious,
Celes snapped. They were now at a small square that looked as if it were under construction for more homes or buildings. People were scrambling about with crates and wooden planks, and imperial soldiers were posted barking out orders to them. Celes slipped past all of that and led the returners down another flight of stairs that actually led into the middle of the square, which was hollowed out a story below the land that was being built on.
We're going to talk in a hole?
Cyan asked, and Celes shook her head.
No. Just come on.
Celes sighed.
Is there anyone around?
Edgar, Locke, and Cyan all looked about them, but saw no one and told her so.
Okay, good,
Celes said, and with that, reached over and pulled open a door that was seemingly camouflaged with the same metal the square was composed of. The other returners looked at her in surprise, but followed her in anyway. They found themselves in a small, dimly lit cafe with all of its tables and stools empty. There didn't even appear to be tender behind the counter.
What is this place?
Cyan asked.
Well, one of you should know,
Celes replied, and smiled a little.
It is a hideout for the returners, you know. What?
Locke and Edgar cried in unison.
Well, it was anyway, until the Empire discovered it and... well...
Celes sighed and put her hands on her hips.
At any rate, we can talk here, because it's deserted. I figured it still would be, the Empire hadn't found any use for this space since I was here last. Very well, let's sit down.
Locke sighed, and they found a table that could seat 4.
So Celes, just what do we do from here? It's going to be somewhat difficult.
Celes sighed.
There is no way we be able to get in the palace alive, so there is no hope trying there. The only other way to get in the Magitech research facility is to go in through its direct entrance. However, that will also be difficult, as I am sure it is guarded as well. It's our safest option though, just because there is less security. You know not of any secret entrances?
Cyan questioned, and Celes shook her head.
No. I didn't need to know them, I had clearance to go through the normal ones. This is a disaster.
Locke moaned.
Can't we use that invisibility spell of yours, Celes? There are barriers made of magic that act as security for anyone who would try that.
Celes explained.
And as soon as a person with the spell is struck with or uses magic, they appear. Are you returners?
A new voice suddenly asked, and the entire table of returners each let out their own little yelp as they turned towards the owner of the voice. It was a young man, dressed in dark clothing with small silver spectacles, holding a bottle of cider in one hand. Locke trailed off, and the man smirked a little.
It's okay, it's not a problem by me.
The man winked.
I'm sort of a returner sympathizer. Oh.
Celes raised her eyebrows.
Shall I tell you something neat?
The man asked.
Well, okay.
Edgar said, and the man took a sip of his cider.
You'd best be careful when you go mucking about in the Magitech research facility. All of the soldiers in there can use magic. That Professor Sid is truly a genius. Professor Sid!
Celes cried.
Tell me, is he well? As far as I know, yes.
The stranger replied.
Who is Sid?
Cyan asked.
The head professor of the Empire.
Celes explained quickly.
He is the one who helped perfect the infusion process for Magitech Knights. He also basically raised me. He's the closest thing to a parent I have ever had. It's been forever since I've seen him. Who was the first Magitech Knight?
Locke questioned, and the stranger jumped in at this.
Well, it was General Kefka.
He exclaimed.
But when he was infused, the process wasn't perfected yet, and something in his mind snapped that day. That explains a lot.
Edgar trailed off.
But I'm afraid it doesn't help us with getting into the facility itself. There is someone who might be able to help you with that.
The stranger replied.
An elderly man by the eastern end of town is also a returner sympathizer. How will we know it's the right old man if we try to seek him out though?
Celes cut in, and the stranger thought a moment.
You'll just know. He's the only guy who ever hangs around all those crates that isn't an Imperial soldier. Thanks. I guess.
Edgar said, and with that, the returners stood up and left the abandoned cafe.
That was creepy how that guy snuck up on us.
Celes sighed.
He was probably lurking in that cafe the whole time we were talking.
Locke added.
But at least he gave us some useful info.
The returners crossed town once again, keeping a careful eye on their surroundings as they did so, and followed the returner sympathizer's directions, looking for the man on the east side of town by all the crates.
Is that him?
Cyan asked nervously, and discreetly pointed towards an elderly man who was leaning back against a large stack of crates, chewing on a sandwich, his teal robes dragging to the dirty ground. Celes made a face and Edgar shrugged.
Well, if that's not him, then I guess I'll see you guys in Imperial Prison.
Edgar laughed, and strolled over to the man. Locke cringed and Celes patted him on the back comfortingly.
It's okay, we can always run for it.
She reassured him.
Excuse me,
Edgar stuttered as he looked up at the man. He didn't quite know what it was he wanted to say. He peered over at the two Imperial soldiers who were guarding an empty pathway that he assumed led to the research facility, and then looked back to the man. The man's eyes suddenly lit up and he grabbed Edgar by the arm, pulling him over behind the crates.
Ack!
Edgar cried, and Locke, Celes, and Cyan all gasped in unison as they watched him disappear with the man. Shh! The old man suddenly exclaimed, and Edgar blinked and shut his mouth.
I'm a returner sympathizer. Oh, thank the gods!
Edgar sighed in relief.
My friends and I need to get to the Magitech research facility.
The man interrupted.
No problem.
He pointed up above him, where there was a steel post and rafters that crawled along just above some of the buildings around them. Edgar's eyes followed the trail until he saw it go off into a smaller building that could barely be seen from behind the Imperial Palace. The research facility.
While I distract the soldiers, climb the steel tower from these boxes, and sneak into the facility.
The old man explained.
Already? Wait.
Edgar said hurriedly, and popped his head up over the boxes, which wasn't hard, since he was so tall, gesturing for the others to come over. Locke hesitantly led the group behind the crates, where the old man quickly explained the plan again. Celes nodded, agreeing.
I think it will work,
she said.
Let's do it. We don't have much time.
With that, Edgar climbed on the tower first, getting ready to go as fast as he could for when the old man began to distract the soldiers. Celes got behind him in line, Locke got behind her, and Cyan remained as the tail of the group. The old man suddenly began to do what looked like a little dance in front of the soldiers, making them nearly drop their swords in surprise.
What the hell?
One of them cried, and the old man began to moan loudly.
I am gonna be sick,
he shouted, and one of the soldiers began to approach him slowly.
Get out of here!
The other soldier groaned, and the old man stumbled over to him, clutching at his stomach.
Erg! Gonna toss it all,
he stuttered, and leaned over the soldier's boots.
Hey!
The soldier cried, and bent over to assist the old man.
Go!
Celes hissed, and with that, Edgar scrambled up the steel tower the rest of the way and began to crawl over the steel rafters towards the research facility. Celes and the others soon followed after, trying not to chuckle as the old man below them made all sorts of horrible and queer noises regarding his illness. As soon as they were far enough behind the soldiers, the returners silently leaped down from the rafters and ran up the path the rest of the way to the Magitech research facility. When they reached the tall steel doors, Celes threw them open. 20. Sid, head scientist of the Empire. Chapter End.